Today, I'm talking with Aslam Khan. Our conversation went in all kind of directions, from the dramatic birth of his children and how he integrated that into his life, over growing up in South Africa during apartheid, to being an accidental role model. And we even ended up talking about a code of conduct of the mafia.
I'm Ivanul from Who's Agile. My pronouns are he and him. Welcome to my channel. You see a lot of agilists around me on this screen. If you want to hear me interviewing, please click that subscribe button because these are the people that I've invited so far. If you think I'm missing people, let me know in the comments. And that like button, well, if you liked today's interview, don't forget to click it.
Hello everyone who's listening in, and with me I have Aslan. Is that the right pronunciation of your name?
It is the perfect pronunciation of my name.
Wow. Okay, that's because usually I try to ask it up front, and I jumped right into it, and I forgot to ask, but I was lucky. Or at least we talked enough on over email that I assumed that was it. And before we jump in, I want to show people a little bit on where you are. So you should see my location, or thanks to Google, you should see my location, which is in Ghent, Belgium. And Aslam, you are, if I'm correct, in Cape Town, which is in probably about the same time zone. What time is it around your time
It's
now?
at the moment we're in the same time zone exactly. When it's your daylight savings, we're off by 1 hour.
Okay, so recording. So my time is now at about 10
Yeah,
minutes after 5, which is about the same thing.
same here, same
And
here.
as you can see, you're in Cape Town, and next to your name is Bevan. Is it? I don't know. Do you have a
Yes,
second?
Bevan. Yes, correct.
And by coincidence, I'm having a conversation with him later tonight. So this is very interesting.
Oh,
On the
lovely.
same moment, I have the conversation with two of you. But let me also bring you back, which is interesting. It's the same day, and you're in the same location. I should have took a plane to go there and have a physical conversation. That would have, but it probably a lot more
I
expensive and time wise. So.
but I think you'll enjoy Cape Town a lot. It's a beautiful city, and you are more than welcome.
Well, it's like I've said already a few times on this podcast. I was scheduled to visit the continent of Africa in 2020 when the pandemic hit. So for obvious
Hmm.
reasons, I didn't do that. But it's still on our goal. The if you do a large family trip, it's still on our plate. We don't know yet when it will be possible because I have now two students, so that's even harder to plan. Two students, university wise. I
Mm.
mean, but it's on our plate. It's on our plate, and we jumped right into this. Aslan, for the people that don't know you, they already discovered you're living in Cape Town. What else do you want people to know about you?
I'm a software developer. I still call myself a software developer, and I work in various roles. I sometimes act as a coach for developers and work with teams to help them get better at their software engineering. I've been known to be part of the Agile community for a long time and haven't been so open and active as many others still are, but the work still continues in that field. Um, I'm I do a fair bit of work that's pro bono for an organization called We Think Code. About 50% of my time is pro bono, and the other 50% of my time is trying to work with people that I really enjoy working with, facing new challenges every day. So that's me, based in Cape Town.
I do hope that your pro bono work is also with people you like to work with, but it may be said a little
Oh,
bit. But
I think I think after I would say that my family says I'm a grumpy old man now because after I turned 50. And all I just say is that, well, I think after I turned 50, the only thing that changed is that I feel I have a license to say certain things and I can use age
mhm.
as an excuse for things where previously I couldn't. Um, And so one of the things I've come to appreciate over my time and life is you get to choose who you want to spend time with, and I think that's important. And so, even though my pro bono work is with people that I love and enjoy spending time with, yes.
Yeah, I thought so. I would be very surprised if you do pro bono work with people that you don't want to work with. That would be amazing. Or that you would actually completely not be a grumpy old man, or have full reason to be a grumpy old man, depending on how you look at it. But
Yes.
okay, I feel already this is going to be a very fun conversation. So let's jump right into that very first question. What is something that people usually don't know about you, but that's influenced you in who you are?
I Yeah, when you sent me that question in preparation for this conversation, I was thinking about that. In the last few years, like yourself and many others, spoken publicly at conferences, and for a while, I felt I had nothing to share on at
Mm,
conferences, and so I pulled back quite a bit. Um, and then good friend of mine said, "There's you should talk about uh, the things that you've done in your life, right, and the things that have influenced you." And so the last couple of talks I did have been incredibly vulnerable talks where I spoke at length about the events in my life that have influenced who I am and the way I approach my work and my philosophy of life and how I interact with people. So there's a part of me that feels like I've already said it. Right, so
mm.
there's nothing more to share, and I'm trying my best to be as authentic as I am publicly as I am privately, and finding the courage to do that. um, but I've been thinking about a few moments in my life that probably influenced me. um, it's going to sound so much like a cliche or a spoken thing, but there's a difference here. The birth of my two children influenced and changed me in dramatic ways. Uh, the first case is my son was born in 2000, and he was born under the most traumatic of circumstances. His mother, my wife, nearly died giving birth to him,
Wow.
and
Okay.
so he was born uh, 2 months premature, tiny little child of 1 kilogram. And my experience of fatherhood was I stood there looking at my wife who was gone into intensive care, not knowing if she's going to live, and my child who was born and put into neonatal intensive care, and I was not sure if he was going to live. And so I looked at the both of them and I went home.
And you
Because
couldn't really do anything,
there
and
was nothing
so
I could do. It
ah,
was the first time I felt the meaning of despair. When you don't have control over something. But it was a positive and happy outcome because they both are alive and still healthy and things like that. But the 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 ability to work through something as life changing, which was meant to be an absolute celebration, turned into something of high stress, high trauma, uh, geared me up for something happened 4 years later when my daughter was born. Um, and a month after she was born, she had a brain hemorrhage and was very close to death.
whoa.
And so that incident, that's why I said my two kids changed everything about my perspective of life and appreciation for life. But she's alive and she's lives life in a wheelchair and she has certain disabilities and challenges. But the balancing out of those experiences about what I value as important, my the way I approach work and contribution has been probably those two in the last 20 years. My son is now 21 and my daughter's 18. So in the last 21 years, that's been the biggest incidences that have influenced me. I still find it difficult to talk about, but it's been a positive influence, and to the point is where people ask, how do you survive things like that? And I said, there's nothing about martyrdom or greater cause. It's having people that you would like, my partner in life, being being there at those moments, and finding the depth and strength within yourselves, because there's something that is more important than yourself. At some point, when you get
Hmm.
to that point of realization, you find a strength and you carry on, right? And you just keep on repeating that over and over. And incredibly balancing part of my life, and it's changed the way I interact with people really tremendously. So there's been
Yeah,
other, but I think
I,
those two stand out for me more than anything else.
I, well, I still feel goosebumps from both stories, like for the three stories, because basically you talk about the birth of the children, but there is also, well, everything that happened to your
Yeah.
partner at that first birth. It's definitely yeah, a life-changing story. And many people talk about how the birth of their children is influencing them. This is definitely next level, and it's not like other births don't mean anything at that level, but it's a different kind of experience, like you say, because you go into the hospital probably thinking, okay, this is going to be celebration. With your son, I can imagine if he's born 2 months early, that there was already some stress, but I
Mm.
don't think you thought about this kind of stress about with your partner and everything. Well, even the day before or things like that. So that's definitely something that will change you. I that Yeah, I'm not sure how to respond to it, but I can
No, it's fine. I
definitely
didn't
see
mean
it.
to start off with
No,
such a
no,
big,
no.
big load and weight on the conversation, but I think most people would appreciate who are parents or have cared enough about something that you can never be prepared for such a commitment. And you can read books and watch things on YouTube and speak to good friends and people who have been there before. But when you're actually there,
Mhm,
you're in your most vulnerable, unprepared state, no matter what you would have done. And I guess even in, if I had to draw a parallel to the kind of work that we do in agile software development, for example, and we help teams, and teams are in a particular state, and we try to influence them to be better. And
mhm.
I don't know what your experience is like, is, but there's no two groups of people where I can apply a formula based approach to say, if we do this, this, and this, it will be fine. Because
Oh, in
if we
Europe,
believe,
that's better. In Europe, we're all the same. It's easier.
I didn't say that, you said it. But
Of course, I'm joking. Everybody
I know
knows
you
this,
are.
I hope.
I know that, and so I think where every team has its own characteristics, personality,
Mm.
context, there's always a part of you that's unprepared for that journey. And similarly here, you're just unprepared. It's just that it was next level for me, absolutely next level.
I like
I
that
think
you make
yeah,
that translation, because indeed we as coaches we like to help people and we like to prepare them as much as possible, and at the
mm,
same time we know, probably like all doctors that are helping children getting born and everything, that yeah, we cannot prepare them for the full extent for whatever will happen, and sometimes it goes into a very well, dangerous situation like it was with you, life threatening situation. Sometimes everything goes fine, because even sorry, even that, it can go faster than they sometimes realize, and then we don't prepare them for that as well. So and even if we would try it, it's just impossible. Things just move
exactly.
the way they move, and yeah, whatever we do. And it's interesting because I sometimes get that request, why didn't you prepare us for this, and why didn't you tell us this and that? And it's like, yeah, even if I would know, I would not be able to give you that same way on
Yes.
how it actually feels. There's no way we can do that, and in most cases we don't know, like your doctor didn't know that it would
No.
happen the day before or whatever, so it's just impossible. But what I like, and this is what I wanted to say, was when I don't know what to say is, it's also not just the dramatic part, but also how you picked it up, because we have a laugh, we have a conversation about it, and you draw everything that you learned about it, and okay, it's 20 years later, so it's all of course a lot easier to talk about it now probably than 19 years ago, but still you drew a lot of life lessons from it, and you kind of integrate it in your life, or that's how it feels to me. Is that a correct explanation or correct way of looking at that?
At the moment, I could not predict nor appreciate how it would have changed and influenced me and my
Mhm.
approach to work in life in general. But you're absolutely right. I there was a choice to be made. I either deal with the stress and the trauma of it and struggle through it, or embrace what it meant in my life and say, how do I actually move forward with this? The long arc of it is that for like my daughter who had a brain hemorrhage, and severe damage to her brain, we had no idea what she would be able to achieve or not achieve in
Mhm.
her life. And so every month of her life, every year of her life, you don't know to what extent she'd be able to read or write. You won't know what's her ability to do mathematics, her ability for spatial recognition, her ability to speak. But it emerges as life goes on. And so you I had to embrace it as a journey of adaptation and discovery and understanding, along with the unknown.
Mhm.
So the biggest thing for me is the adjustment to dealing with ambiguity and unknown in a very, very powerful way, to the point where I now seek the ambiguity and the unknown. Even in my work, it's like, we don't know about that. Then my default is, let's go there. Let's go there. That's where we want to go. I don't want to
I,
hang out here where the light shines brightly. We must go where we can't see. It's shadows.
I Yeah, I don't want to sound unempathically, but I think it's actually true for all children. But for you, it is what's much more clearer with your daughter because of the situation. You knew right away that a lot of that would be unclear on where things would go. And I think if I look back on where my children are, my oldest is 20, it's similar kind of things. We didn't
Yes,
have these kind of challenges that you said, but it was definitely as unpredictable as anything that
exactly.
I've
Right?
ever seen before. And yeah, that's great. I agree, but I think many people, and I think this is what a lot of parents make us are unprepared for when they chart, because
Yeah.
when you start with becoming a parent, you have all these visions and you read all these books, and then it's like, yo, okay, this will do, and and I have this grand vision of how we will do it,
Yes, exactly.
uh,
And
and then the
plan for
child
you and your own
has a
children.
yeah, exactly. The child has a thing on its own, and then your partner has a vision also, and you have to merge it. And then there is a school, and there is trends, and it's oh yeah,
Yeah, so
that's
in a large part, I am glad that I found a way to integrate it into who I am and make
mm.
it part of me as opposed to something that I have to deal with.
I think that's a great life lesson. I would say is looking at it in that way. I don't see in any other way, but I've definitely seen many other people trying or fighting it and feeling grumpy and sad and mad and whatever about it. But that won't change anything. It's better to a little bit like you say, use it as a kind of discovery game. And okay, what's the next challenge and see what else there is. And I assume that that also has a very positive impact on your daughter herself, because if you are not grumpy and saying, okay, you're a problem or whatever, but you look at more as a discovery, how can I help you? And what else can we do to figure it out? I assume that that has a positive impact on how she's standing in life, I assume.
It is, um, it's bi-directional. Like, a lot of it
Hmm.
is guide, receive feedback, adjust, help the other person understand, help her struggle with her lack of understanding, based on her view of the world, um, demanding a lot of, from myself and anyone who cares for her, to step on her side and look at the world from that perspective. Um, and so it is genuinely bi-directional in that regard. I've learned a lot from that process, and as much as I could have guided and shared, the use the parallels with work and professional and coaching and helping organizations change their way of working and things like that. It's incredibly similar. Uh,
Oh
it's
yeah.
like
I,
fine
I
tune
like.
into that, and adapt, observe, act, reconsider, tweak it, iterate, all of that. Same thing.
And but
Same.
also the bidirectional part, I really like that you brought it in because we learn so much from our children. I think, well, if I look at when I started, yeah, I thought yes, we can learn from our children, but I'm still the adult, I'm still the grown up. But no, it's not that. It's really bidirectional. We learn as much from our children as they learn from us, and I think that's also true in our work life. We tend to, or at least I'm hired to help as a coach with an organization, and then I run into my own challenges, and then it's like, okay, now I need to adapt and learn to help you better, and it goes in all these kind of directions.
Mm.
That's yeah,
The the the, the poet Khalil Gibran wrote one something along the lines of, you know, children are the thieves or the ruins of our youth, right? They ruin our youth. They take away our youth from us, our children, and he writes it in a way about, the ruins of our life, but in a very beautiful, positive way. And so I sometimes think about, well, then I should leave beautiful ruins behind. So there's just something that should be appreciated by whatever I've left behind, if that's all that's left of what I've contributed. So that's the way I look at it.
yeah. Lucas here, two plus 50 years old, talking about youth and what we've learned from it.
Don't tell anyone that we still
Yeah,
think we're young
exactly.
and we're able.
I still think everybody around me of my age is about somewhere between 16 and 20, which is impossible because I have two children or older than that. But yeah, it's, it still
Yes.
sometimes feels, but it's in the spirit and the mind.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move to that second question. That yeah. When you look at things, if you had not been doing what you've been doing now, what would have become of you? Do you have any idea?
I think I do, actually, about what I would have done. So my family, not in which I grew up, like my parents and my siblings. I was very fortunate. Both my parents were medical doctors, and uh, both my older brothers were in the medical field. My eldest brother is a pharmacist, and my other brother is a medical doctor as well. And they married people in the same profession. So I'm the only one who did not become a medical doctor or was in the medical field in my family. And I remember in my last year of high school, my father very politely came and said to me, Aslam, I don't know what you're planning to do, but you can have a very, very fulfilling career as a doctor. He wasn't insistent. He didn't push me or anything. And I just said to him, I'm doing electronic engineering, Dad. And he said, why? I said, because as a doctor, I've seen you work too hard, too long hours. People would
Mhm.
call you at any hour of the day and you get up to do that. And over all the years, I think I've worked harder writing software to ridiculous hours than my father ever did. There was always this influence of a career in the medical field. I
So
think there's
wait, look,
aspects of
can I
yeah.
go a little bit back because in a
Yes.
sense you're saying that his how would I call it, his work ethic still grew on you. Is that
Oh
something you said?
yes, 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 definitely.
Okay.
Absolutely and definitely. The strong influence is his altruism. Definitely, both my parents has influenced the way I approach things, and I think that has a direct bearing on me deliberately choosing to do this amount of pro bono work that I am doing at the moment. Has been that. But I think what would I have done? Two options. Something in the medical field was definitely a
Mhm.
possibility, um, and if not, I did have at one stage consider, and this is something people don't know as me about me as well, is that I would have gone into animation.
Animation.
Mm,
Wow.
mm,
That's
I
that's
would have.
that. This is, so you're somewhere in IT as a developer, as a coach, but a little bit both, I would say. So there is the medical part and there is the
Mm.
animation part, which is I don't know how to put them, but they're completely different kind of fields. What made you interested in that field, I would say.
I, I I used to, just for my own fun and without any education and things, sketch and draw a lot and do a lot of cartoony things growing up and things like that. And the 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 digital aspect of it started to intrigue me. What you could do on a computer. I taught myself programming back in the 80s on whatever limited computing power we had. Fascinated by those things, realized that there is a future in this thing here, and there was a creative element. There was a freedom of creating things that felt like without boundaries. In that you could create a world that didn't exist, and I think I've kind of, in some ways, appreciated that about software development as well. You create a world that is hard to realize and touch in your hands. So I think it's
Yeah,
related.
I think that
It's
definitely a lot
serious
of
nerd.
developers would see it that way. We
Yeah.
create kind of things that don't exist before, or
Mm,
they might exist in the idea of our customers in a sense,
mm.
but
Yeah. So
we
I think
definitely
I would
bring it in a
have.
different way.
It may have been that. Yeah.
Mhm. And when you said that almost everyone in your family is a doctor, you said your father didn't really push you, but he quietly or nicely asked you.
Yes.
Did they understand your choice?
Um, I don't think they understood my choice, and I don't think my mum is will be 91 years old in October this year, right? And when she turned 90 last year, it was the same thing. She asked me to please explain to her what I do so she can tell people. So I think that it's a different generation, and they've never actually worked with anything in computers in as a big part of their life, and so they don't understand that. Didn't understand that. I chose to do electronic engineering because I wanted to know how to build electronic devices and computers and things. I ended up in programming. I ended up writing software in my first job. Never practiced as an electronic engineer. Uh, and so it was a double whammy. They didn't understand either.
Hmm. So you said I'm going there, and in the end, you diverged a little
Yes,
bit, and that
yes,
was even harder for them probably to
yes,
understand. So yeah,
exactly.
I can see
Uh,
that.
and in the context of that time in South Africa, the late 1980s, it was at the height of us protesting against an apartheid government. You know,
Hmm.
it was only 4 years, 5, 6 years later that Nelson Mandela was released and the ANC was unbanded and stuff like that. But it was at that height, and so the opportunities to study in different fields was very, very uncommon. So you had the typical things was you could be a teacher, a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant, you know, uh, or open up a store and try to do that as a middle class family, right? To go into something like engineering was unheard of. It was unusual to do that, and so when I in my uh, university that I studied at, uh, the number of non-white uh, students in engineering was a handful. It was small. It was, under 30% of the cohort, and so
Wow,
it
that's
was
not
an
much.
unfamiliar thing. It's
And
changed since then.
was there any hostility to you or to the non-white people, or was that already
Hmm.
at the level that people started to accept it, or how should I see it?
Well, a few years before I started university, like when my brothers started university 4 years before me, as a non-white in South Africa, you had to apply to the university to enter and get accepted. But in addition, if you're non-white, you had to get uh, a character reference from 3 people to say you're a person of good citizenship, you're a decent person.
Wow.
And so,
And that was not needed for the white people.
no, no,
They were officially decent by
yes,
definition,
yes,
which is, if you look at from an from a historical point of view, okay, we don't want maybe to go too much into that, but I
yes,
would not agree on it.
yeah. So this the the thing is that our academic year starts in January in South Africa, or February
Mm.
for university, and the high school year finishes in December, right? So you finish high school in December, you enroll in university in the next February, right? So you have the Christmas period. In the month of January, we used to have a queue of uh, high school kids finishing high school that used to come to both my parents as medical doctors. Therefore, they had a certain stature in the community, as people that were respected, who would come there and ask for character references. Now, my parents would have been their family doctors for a long time, probably treated them. And so they used to be sitting, not treating patients, but actually writing character references for some of these kids that want to get into university.
Wow. So you saw
Strange things.
already that the
Yeah.
thing that your parents did, because
Mm.
that's also kind of pro bono work, I assume.
Yes. Yeah.
That is your parents were helping
Mm.
out other people in your community.
Mm.
So that I can imagine that that also has an influence on who you are.
Yeah.
Um,
It's strange things we do as human beings, right?
well,
Invent things.
I'm not sure how well it's strange. It's helping the people around us because basically what you describe feels very unjust on how you are treated as
Oh,
humans, I
absolutely.
would say.
Yes.
And so then I find it normal that we kind of support each other. I see way too much of the opposite is that the people who are not treated well start to fight each other because that's what the other people who create these unjust rules want. They want, and then they can say, you see, they are actually whatever to say that there were real reasons why we had to have these rules, but actually
Yeah.
it's the rules that create that kind of behavior. And your father and your mother both they behaved in the opposite way. They say, okay, let's support each other and
Mm.
let's show this. And so, but that my question was more about you at university. So you already said it
Mm.
before, so that's definitely yeah,
Yeah,
a way of
you
treated
felt it.
that's not nice. And so once you got in university, you still felt it. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, it was unavoidable, Leaves. And by the time I got to university, it was you freely mixed, but it didn't mean that you were welcome in any way.
Mm,
And so the non-whites in the class would always sit in the last couple of back rows of the lecture hall at a room, and the whites sat here. If there was group work, uh, the non-whites would have their own groups, and that we studied and we played and socialized independently of each other, genuinely so.
mm.
It's not that we were hostile to each other. I think we were amicable to each other, but you felt the tension. You felt
And
the division.
and because of that, because if you don't know each other, yeah, the kind of the
Mm.
apartheid stays in the sense that because
It's
you don't know each
institutional.
other exactly. So
It's
that's yeah.
institutional. It's by design. There's an architecture to it. It's
Mm.
institutional. It's a social architecture, that's designed to keep people separate and keep people ignorant of the realities of our humanity. And so, in university, like I, the university was on the east coast of South Africa, on the beaches, in a coastal town with beaches and things. And there used to be beaches for whites and non-whites, right? And so one of the campaigns we did was to free the beaches. And so we used to stand and go out and protest and be, brutalized by police and things like that. And when you're that age, everything is possible, and you have the energy and the reasons were obvious for why we should be protesting against this. And so even at university, used to deal with that. Um, it was a tough time. It was different times, but incredibly, how should I say, valuable.
Mm.
I wouldn't change it.
Well, and you got well. There was definitely a big change, and I
Mm,
think you had with Nelson Mandela someone who really stood up and tried to say, okay, let's try to bring both sides together after
mm,
he became. your leader, I
Mm,
would say,
mm,
and that had their own challenges as well afterwards also.
mm,
And that kind of brings me to that next question
mm.
about what is your biggest challenge and why is it a good thing for you?
Oh gosh, this is a horrible question. It's a beautiful, horrible question. Let me put it that way. I think I think one of the biggest challenges I faced in the past, growing up in apartheid and moving into a democratic society, is understanding my anger against the institution of apartheid back then, and coming to
Mm,
terms with it. Like you mentioned, around things like Nelson Mandela gets released, and there's a call by him for the statue that he carried to embrace each other. But how do you do that when you still carry a lot of anger that you don't really understand the deep source of it, and how do you move past that? I wasn't openly hostile or aggressive or anything, but deep inside me, I was angry,
but
and working
if
through
I
that.
understand what you said right now, you said it's more anger at the system than
Yes,
anger at people, but you
no,
didn't
not the
understand it.
the system. Yes, and you work through that, and so one of the challenges I would say is trying to come to terms with what it means and what I understood, and then applying what I understood to adjust my life for something that could be way better. Um, I think that's largely then as an example. The challenge I always face is the deep introspection that is necessary in order to make meaningful change and adjustment in my life. It's a long process. It takes time. You got to seek the counsel of those who are uh, willing to be critical and still love you.
Mm. Yes, I can definitely see that. That's yeah, that and that is a big challenge. At the same time, yeah, and encourage people to challenge you and to tell you the hard stuff and
Yes.
accepting their love at the same time. It's hard. It's definitely
Yeah.
because we all want to grow and we all want feedback, but the moment that we get it, it sometimes feels like the people don't love us anymore because they give feedback that we didn't see coming. And of course, we need the feedback because if we saw it coming, we don't need the other people to tell us. But yeah, that's the hard part to me.
Yes. If you only receive the positive feedback, you know, with,
It's good for our egos, but that's about it.
exactly, it just inflates our ego, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. So
that's
I think that's the hardest thing, and but over the years I've come to appreciate the self reflection that is necessary, the checkpoints of self, and do that. And I try my best now to live a as humble a life as possible. Uh, I can't say that I always succeed, but that's part of being there and doing that. Yeah.
yeah, I like that you bring that up that we don't always succeed because sometimes people look at us. Well, I'm just now exaggerating a little bit, but I see
Mm,
similarities with what happened with me. That sometimes people say, "Oh, but you do this and this." Yeah, it's not because I do some of these things that it's not challenging, and that's what I'm hearing with you as well. You get some feedback, and sometimes you say, "Okay, thank you," and you work with it, and sometimes it's like first like, "Okay, thank you." It's a
yes.
little bit like that. It still is
Mhm.
challenging, and so yeah, it's people don't always see the other side, and I try to be like you say, try to be open and transparent about some of these things. But sometimes we first have to understand ourselves, and a little bit before we can be transparent about some of that.
Mm. Yes.
So that's yeah, that's very powerful. And it's for me, and whatever you're saying, it brings me a lot to the questions or your answer seems to be related because it brings me to that next question: what drives you? What's the drive that you have?
I think I'm a I think in some ways I'm a functional professional procrastinator. Let me put it to you that way. I
Functional professional procrastinator.
yes,
Okay, yeah.
yes. I do like working under some degree of pressure. If I
Mm.
know there's a time box in which I need to get something done and accomplish that in a good way, not just tick the box, but like I'm proud of that. Working within a tight boundary is it's gives me energy. It really does. It genuinely does. um, like for example, if I'm preparing for a conference, it is something that I will linger for a talk for a long time, from the time I submitted the proposal or been accepted to the time I will give the presentation. It's the last day I would sit down and say, right, now it's slides. And
Mm.
I'd do that at the day before. uh,
But you still, like you say, it's lingering in the back of your head. So
yeah,
it's not that
yeah,
it's not there. So you let your brain work on it, but just
yes.
not actively.
But the active physical act of producing something like that is in that way. I think the other thing that drives me is if someone says to me, no, oh no, that's impossible, we can't do that. That is like a
Mm.
magnet for me. It's like, no, we might not be able to achieve that, but we can still do something really powerful here. We need to get there, even if we miss by a mile. It's still better than not doing it. So let's go there.
Hmm. I like that because, yeah, basically what you're saying is missing a goal but nearly achieving it is better than not aiming at all. That is, oh
Exactly.
yeah, that's so true. But so
Yes.
many people are afraid of missing that they forget to aim and they don't even shoot because
Yes.
and so a lot of people say, you see, I missed. Well, yeah, you and if it's, of course, if it's shooting and you miss goal, it feels like complete miss. But in
Mm.
our work, what we're doing, missing is actually a lot better than not doing anything. That's, oh, that is very,
Yeah.
very powerful. Oh, thank you.
So
I never thought about it that way, but it's, yeah,
my
I love
pleasure.
it.
So ambiguity, uncertainty, that I find intriguing. It brings out a curiosity in me that draws me to that. It gives me energy to move forward in that. Um, and when you make an impact because of something that you do, when it's something you can see has a positive outcome for other people, that is incredibly motivating to me. It really, really is. Uh, to the point where it's never, I never approach things about me. It's always going to be about the difference that we can make if we try to do something together. Um, and that's what we're after. It's the change as a result of the action that
So,
excites me.
so what I'm hearing is that what drives you is basically changing the world and helping people
Small,
around you. Is that,
small
yeah,
parts.
okay?
World is big, Eves. Small parts.
Yeah, the world. Well, okay, but what drives you is making that small little change, and
Yeah,
like you say,
yeah,
if you aim for the big change and you only achieve a small part, you
hmm,
still change
hmm,
something.
yeah,
It's like that the little rocks that we put into the river, it changes how the river is floating. But
yes,
of
exactly.
course, you don't see it, or most people don't see it, but it does have an impact. And maybe
Mm,
10 years later, if that little rock will have changed a huge impact on how the river floats, because it has a thing there.
yeah,
So that's, yeah.
yeah. I genuinely believe, I deeply believe that I the things we do, if you do it with the right intention, you don't need to worry about it because it's gonna make a difference anyway. Because it's done with the right
Oh.
intention for the right reasons, and you might not know the impact it's had until much later, if ever. I met someone who was with me in high school a long time ago, and then again in university, and many years later I met him, and he says, you were a big influence in me choosing a career in software development. And I said, but I haven't told you
Wow.
30 years. And he says, yeah, but I saw what you did. And I said, I wasn't even trying to be a role model or anything. I was just trying to get my act together. you know I was trying.
Survive in a way, and then people look around you and say, "Oh, Aslam,
Yes,
that you're a big role model," and you're like,
yes,
"What? What am I?"
exactly. And I don't. put myself there as I don't hold myself in that position. But my point is that every one of us has the potential, with the right intention of our actions, to make a difference beyond our immediate zone of feedback. It's years. There's a latency to it. Years later, months later, maybe not in your lifetime, it has an impact. It genuinely does. If you can't believe that, I think we need to think about why we exist.
It's interesting. Well, there's one sentence that you said that I want to challenge a little bit. You said with the right intentions. I think we always have impacts, but if we, it might be a bad influence that we have. If we're doing things for the wrong reasons, we might also have an impact. So we better wise up and do the good things because it has impact not just on ourselves but also on the people around us.
I
Um,
think, yeah. I Look, I think everyone acts with a particular intention, whether they state it or not.
yeah.
I think people that are open, transparent, and consistently in that way, their intentions are obvious. And you also get people who might not be clear in their intentions, and in some ways, we would say they are deceitful or other negative characteristics. But everyone is looking for some kind of outcome, and the actions carry that.
Mhm.
It's in the payload of action. I think even in a family, in a mafia family, they know what they want as an outcome. Right? I'm being a bit extreme here, and they
Yeah,
have a
but
code of
there is.
conduct. They have a code of conduct, and they know what they want and know what they want to influence, and so they act in that way. It's very clear what they're not ambiguous about it, and they through that action they achieve that whatever was intended. And so I
They're
think
value driven, eh? Mafia.
they are. We don't agree with it, but they are value driven.
Exactly. We
I don't
disagree
agree
on
with
the values, but they have they are
There's
value.
a
Yeah,
moral
they are
code.
value
Yes,
driven.
yes.
Exactly.
There's a moral code.
I never thought about a code of conduct for the mafia, but yeah, they have a code of conduct. We just think differently about their code of conduct. But that, yeah, that's a good way of.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. But it's really true. Some people we really like to think as the bad people as they don't have any values. Yes, they do have values, and some of their are even stronger. Only their values might be completely
Yeah.
different as ours. And I think there is, for me, the big thing that we can learn from each other.
Mm,
Let's. I think it's actually much easier if we're value driven. The only thing we need to look now is what values do we agree on.
yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think having worked with teams for many years and things, the default is most there's I think very like less than the fingers on one hand have been experiences in my life where people woke up with a very a genuinely malicious intent in what they wanted to
Mm.
do, where they're genuinely hurtful in that. Most people, and I've said this on stage conferences, that nobody goes home after work and tells their family over dinner, "Let me tell you how I messed it up today because I really got a thrill out of it." Nobody goes home as a developer and says, "Let me tell you about these bugs that I created. Oh, it was such a thrill." No one does that.
No,
You
no
know,
one does that. Yeah. No,
we go there and we just make a mistake sometimes, or we didn't know better what to do, and we just accidentally screwed up along the ways. But the intention is right. We meant well, you know.
Yeah, we meant well, and for under
Yeah,
pressure, we might not realize what
exactly.
bugs that we realize,
Yeah,
and we
happens.
also do it for. Yeah, I agree there.
Yeah.
Let's move to that next one because it's kind of like the same thing. Is that we're talking about achievement? So what is the thing that you're most proud of? What's your biggest achievement for yourself?
I I I don't I don't think about things like that, Is I genuinely
Mhm.
don't have a list of things that I can tick off and say, "Oh, I did that, that, and that." I think whatever I've done will be surpassed by others who may or may not use the work I've done and continue in that way, or and hopefully better than whatever
Mhm.
I've been able to achieve. And so I don't live and conduct my life and frame my life by achievements. I'd like to be able to look back upon my life and say, on the balance of things, there was more positive impact than negative. Um,
Mm. That's
and
also an
the
achievement on its own. Without that, it's a very, yeah,
Yeah, but
without being
I
one
can't
very
name it.
specific
I
thing.
can't name it.
Okay.
No, I can't, and I don't do
Mm.
that. I have had people come to me and say, "Oh, but you've done the following," and I said, "Well, I never set out to do that. I happened to do that because it meant something to a bigger
So,
outcome."
so
So
for you, when I ask about your biggest achievement, it should be you feel that I'm asking about something that you deliberately chased? Because for me, it doesn't have to be. You can still achieve something by accident, for example, that you can still be happy about. But
mm,
it feels that for you, these are two different things. Is this
yeah,
correct?
yeah, yeah. It is. Things happen. It I'm not dismissive of my privilege in any way whatsoever. Some of it has been through my own efforts and work. I've been able to be in a privileged position, but it's not the focal point of my existence. No, not at all. You know,
Mm,
um, I'd give you an example, right? I mean, we're stuck here at the bottom of Africa in a tiny place, and with all our challenges and things. And I didn't have access to a big nerd. I love enjoying and I love working with computers and programming and things. And I used to read books, and I want to be with the people that wrote the books. And it's like, oh, there's a conference, so let me try to get to the conference. The cheapest way for me to get to a conference was to be accepted as a speaker, because then
mm.
my company would sponsor me, or the or the conference would sponsor me. And that's not because I wanted to speak; it's because I wanted to learn from the people who were
Listen,
speaking. So that was my motivation. So, and then you end up on stage. Now you've got to do something about it. Now you actually have to say something meaningful. But I didn't stand up, wake up one day and says, "Oh, I want to speak at a conference." No, not at all. No.
but you have to speak up at the conference to make sure that next time you can
Yes.
come again. Because of course, if you're a bad speaker, then they will
Yes.
say, "Okay, let's never invite this Aslan person again." Because okay,
Yes.
and then you have
Yeah.
trouble.
Yeah, exactly. And because of that, the value for me, the achievement, I guess if I had to call it out, is that I've been able to make friendships and relationships across, parts of the world that I never would have if I didn't have this desire and curiosity to learn more.
I like that. So it's an achievement. So basically, in one way or another, it's for
Oh, thanks.
different kind of reasons. You
Mm,
you wanted to make sure that you connected with other persons, so that you would
mm,
learn from other people. So your achievement, in a sense, is learning from the rest of the world, not just from the people who happen to visit you
yes.
in South Africa, in Cape
Yeah.
Town. So that is an achievement.
Mm.
Okay, let's
Well,
move to the. Oh no,
thanks
you
for
wanted to add
thanks for
something?
explaining that to me. Thanks for explaining that to me.
I'm just trying to reflect on what I hear you say. Yeah,
No, you said it
but
well. Thank you.
it's well, I think if people who happen to listen to a lot of these, I think it's the biggest question or the hardest question for many people. And I've been doubting if I would keep this question in, but because it's so powerful at the same time to learn about our achievements, and there's sometimes there are people here who say, okay, I'm very proud of this, but many people struggle with that, and it's sometimes hard to say.
Mm,
And I think it's also good because I've noticed it in myself. It's easier for me to be proud of what you achieved or what my children achieved than to be proud of
mm,
what I achieved myself.
yes.
But if I have to tell my daughter or my sons, like, okay, you can be proud of this, why can't I say it to myself and be proud of whatever I achieved? And that's something that I've been struggling, and so this is why I've been keeping this question in, because I see a lot of people struggling with
Mm,
that. Um, and I'm not so much chasing and okay, I've acquired $1 million, or I don't know.
yeah.
It's not always these the biggest things, and sometimes it's big, but sometimes it's like you say, it's small little things that you achieved maybe by accident, but that you can still be proud of because it had influence on you and on other people,
Mm.
I would say.
Keep the
So
question. It's a good
Yeah, I'll
question.
keep it. I'll keep it. Let's move to that next one. Do you have a personal agility tip to share?
Uh, we spoke a little bit just now about
Hmm.
missing the goal by a mile, but still making a difference. I was talking with my business partners a few years back, and they said, "Oh, but Aslam, you don't do ready, aim, fire. You do ready, fire, aim." Uh, and and in some ways, I was first like, "Well, I'm not reckless in that way, but it is actually about trying to extract feedback as sooner than later, you know." And that is, I'd say that uh, try to do the smallest trying to do the smallest things uh, uh, in that gives you the biggest amount of feedback in the shortest time is
Mm.
probably going to be more valuable than anything that you try to do with the incredible amount of planning.
I like that. Somehow the way you explained it reminds me also about a metaphor that or at least I forgot for a very long time, just until you talked about it now, is the fire bullets, or I don't know what is it, but it's somewhere in XP they talked about. Um, Firing bullets but are really that are lightning bullets, so because
Mm.
you fire the lightning bullets you see where you're
Hmm.
firing, and because of that you're better at aiming for the real
Yes.
bullets.
Yes.
And that's a lot what I hear you saying. It's the feedback that tells you, okay, it's a little bit too much to the left or to the right, so I should move my yeah,
Yeah.
and fire at that
Mm.
time. That's what it
Yeah.
sounds to
And
me.
I try to do that in everything that I do these days. What is the smallest step I can take, and what's the maximum I can get out of what is the maximum I can learn from taking that step? If I can't learn anything from taking that step, then I need to reconsider the step
Ah.
I want to take. Uh, Maybe it's a step towards something, and therefore it's setting me up. It's like a stepping stone. Take that step, get there, and then you'd see the next thing. But most of the time, I'm trying to extract the maximum from understanding from the step that I take. And from that, I can now plan the next move and the next move and the next move. So I do that with my work. I do that with teams I work with. I do that with code. I do that with just generally any task I do.
So, and I also here make your steps small enough, because if you want to
Oh
do that the
yeah,
way you explain, it doesn't work with very
yeah,
large steps. And of
yeah,
course, if you do it very quickly, you can only do small
yeah.
steps. So
The
it's
thing
kind
that
of
makes me take bigger steps is my ego. It really is.
oh yeah, we think we're ready for the world and say, yeah, bring it on, and then poof, you run
One
into
step,
the
then
wall.
we're done. It's my but yeah, your ego is quickly it's quickly balanced out when you realize you're taking a step too big. Yeah,
It's
that's
yeah,
approach it. I'd
that's
encourage people to do that. Yeah, it's worked.
I like that you pointed back, because indeed a lot of the things that we take larger steps, and even when people warn us up front, like, okay, this step might be a little bit too big, if we still take it, it's usually is our ego that tells you, yeah, don't listen to that weirdo. That other person has no idea. We are so smart and we know better, and we have more experience, or we whatever, and basically it means my ego is more important than whatever that other person says. And it could be right, but it's for the wrong reasons. It's for the ego that takes over. That's never a good
Mm.
thing to do.
I,
I
I,
like
I
that.
I do the same when I'm planning workshops and training and things like that. People will always, who I'm teaching or training, would ask me for an agenda for the workshop and what are we going to do on day one and day two, or in the morning and the afternoon. And my first response is that there's no agenda. It's your workshop. I'm there to share. We'll figure it out. No, no, no. We need an agenda, right? And so
Mhm.
I'll make up an agenda and discard it in the moment we walk into the room and said, that agenda, we at least we know when we're going to have a coffee break and lunch. But what is it you want
But
to
for
do?
external parties, it might be important indeed
Yes,
to
it
have to
is.
know
It
when the
is.
coffee break is, and And if
Yes.
people are, for whatever reason, they have to be connected to the home base or to others,
Yeah.
so they might be important about breaks.
Mm.
I use kind of similar things. I prefer to use a Kanban board as an
Yeah.
agenda, and I say,
Yes.
okay, these are the big topics. What topics do you want to add? And usually they come up with much more interesting topics than I have. And
Exactly.
and I keep like one or two jokers that I know that I need to explain, because otherwise you won't understand the rest of it. And it's not because I know it better, because I just know that there is a connection. And
Yes.
no, I'll put it differently, because there is a connection between how I explain one thing and another, that I prefer to explain one thing before another. It doesn't mean that no one else can explain it in a different order, but I just don't know it yet. So it's more about me than about the people
Mm.
who receive it. But like you say, what they want to learn is way more important than that agenda. It's we can throw it out the moment we walk in. It's
Mm.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I would really. Yeah, it's so. Let me drink a little bit from my voice.
Are you
It's so
okay?
interesting. Yeah, I'm okay.
Okay.
It's so
Good.
interesting that so many people they want that certainty when they want to learn about something new, and they want that certainty, but actually we cannot give it to them. It's a fake certainty.
Yes. It's comforting until you get into the moment and you realize that everything that you tried to prepare for, some aspects still apply and some don't. Now we've got to do something
Mhm.
about it. Mm.
Exactly. And talking about not knowing what will happen, 2 years ago we had that big pandemic hitting, and then we all had to stay home. And a lot of us,
Mm.
for a lot of us, that was the first moment that we had to work remote. Not for all of
Yeah.
you, for all of us. So, could you tell us something that you learned about remote? And maybe start. Did you work remote before the pandemic, or was it at that time that it started for you?
A little bit remotely. Uh, it
Hmm.
was a minority. I'd say under 20% of my time was remote.
Hmm.
Uh, and suddenly we were thrust into this world of online everything. What did I learn? I learned that I absolutely need to have. It's not absolutely. It's so much harder to build rapport and understand and appreciate the nuances of each of ourselves online. You know, there is there's a subtlety and a power to sitting in the same room
Hmm.
and having a conversation with someone that actually creates a powerful connection that you just cannot we cannot yet replicate online. We cannot. um, I, I there was a team that I worked with, an initiative that I was part of, where at the start of the pandemic we incepted a new team and everyone was online, and we are online for the entire pandemic of 2 years or so, having never met. I'm currently working with a client in the UK, and that's I've never met them. It's disconcerting for me. I have considered actually just flying to the UK just to meet them for a day or two,
Hmm.
to establish that. When the opportunity came up for doing work face to face again, I did a workshop with a team here in Cape Town, and I asked, "Is it possible for us to do this one day workshop face to face?" I'm a, with your COVID protocols and stuff that were easing up by then, and they said yes, absolutely. It was such a jolt of energy to my being, having been in the same place as people. I there's a whole bunch of positive things that have come with working online. I've been able to connect with people, and where it saved me a lot of travel time, and that's better for the world and the climate and everything else. But there's a downside to it, which I do miss the human contact. Um, I do.
Hmm.
I have noticed some organizations where the remote working has blurred the boundaries of a safe time and a space, and so it just continues indefinitely that it's just work, 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 and some people are automatically available. It's like social media where people assume you're always available, you know. because they look at your timeline and they see, oh, he might be awake. Doesn't matter, you're not. But it's now extended, that approach has extended into remote working with Zoom and whatever else. And I think
I,
it's we need to manage our mental health and energy in that way. We really do. Uh,
I like that especially the last phrase. We need to manage that, and I think that is what I see a lot of people struggling with it.
mm,
And I like the connection you make with social media because I'm on Twitter a lot. But what I've learned, like I think more than 10 years ago, is that I'm not on Twitter full time, and I have a
mm,
lot of people that I follow, and in a sense that I'm not interested, or I'm no longer maybe the first year to see each and every tweet and each and everything that
mhm,
everybody says that I'm following. I'm like, if I'm on, I'm on, and I'm looking at the little bit things what people were saying, but I have no fear about losing out everything that
mhm,
was said since the last time I've been on. It's just impossible. Um, and that's one of the things I've learned by maybe following a little bit too many people is that it's just impossible to do everything.
yes.
And I had to learn to put on some boundaries for myself and say, okay, I'll do it on sometimes. And I also like the fact that you make the link. Oh, people think you're online. No, actually, for me, for example, a lot of my followers are in the US, which is a totally
Hmm.
different time zone. So
Yes.
for that, I learned to like I don't know 5 or 10 years ago that it's actually good to schedule some tweets in the night when I'm asleep, and so there might be responses that I will only see 4 or 5 hours later,
Uh-huh.
and that's okay. So it's not because you see me saying something that I
Mm,
might be actually on. It might be that it's scheduled. Because I've discovered that when I was on a train and I saw a friend of mine that was also actually I was working with a friend, and I was see both of us, we were on a train but to a different part of the country going home, and we both of us we were sending a lot of tweets about the things that we discovered just looking there, and I was realizing like, wait a minute, I just now did a tweet storm for 5 to 10 minutes with lots of different content in lots of different directions. The people that follow me, it looks like it's bombarding, and then I
yeah.
might be offline for another 24 hours or something like that. And
Yeah.
I realized that it's actually more interesting if I schedule these tweets out a little
Yes.
bit. Then it looks differently. It's less bombarding, and I can
Mm,
still get it out of my system. And it was much more relaxing. I didn't feel the need to put it out immediately. I looked at it at some of these things and say, okay, is it interesting? Should I really put it to the world, or is it something that has to be now? Can it be in half an hour? Can it be in a
mm,
day? Can it be in a month? Or is it even needed to do that?
yeah.
And thinking about that for my mental health made a huge difference. Um, and I'm really happy that I learned that like 10 years ago before the pandemic, and that when the
Mm,
pandemic hit, I kind of could look at my, like you say, there is that boundary, and it's, yeah, I'm working from home or I'm recording from home. I can walk out of the door of my
mm,
office and be with my family, and when this conversation is over. Um,
yes.
and it's the boundary, it's important.
Mm. That aspect of being accessible to people in your immediate circle, your family, your friends, who people you live with, um, that has been the positive side.
Mm.
That's a good balancing act that came out of that. Like, I do appreciate that. I'd finish a meeting and or call or just stop working on whatever I was working on, and I could walk into the kitchen and make a cup of coffee, and you know my one of my kids would be there, and we'd say a few words and then come back, where ordinarily, you'd be caught up in your work, or you'd only see them at the end of the day, or dinner or something. It's nice. I like that. I like that accessibility within your circle, within your space, your physical space, that you get from friends and family that live with you. I like that part of it.
Yeah, it for me it's also one of the reasons why I'm doing this video series is that, like, okay, like I said, like a little bit like you, we have children that are let's face it, in the last years that they will be living at home, it's
Hmm.
in their 20s. It's like, okay,
Yes.
they might still be at home, but they're not going to live at home for the next 10 years. So we start to realize it's much more.
Mm,
And it's like, at this moment, I don't want to go off to conferences all the time. I want to
mm.
do these recordings with friends, like we said earlier on. This is our first chance to actually meet each other, even if it's virtually.
Yes.
And I like that I can do it from my home. I like to have it. I feel the connection. So I understand what you say. It's different, but at the same time, I feel it's nice to be connected. There's different touch to than the emails. Even if the email conversations we had were always good, it's not that. But it's the next level.
It
It's
is.
not yet the level that we can physically touch each other. But for me, it's already a level that I'm happy that I can do from my own home,
Hmm.
of staying as much into my family. And I think what I like what you said about it, we definitely need to look into the next years to find the boundaries, what is needed. Like you say, maybe go work with a client in the UK and then visit once every X time to
Yeah.
physically see, and that people see, oh, this is a person that is actually from flesh and blood, like we say in Dutch, like it's a really existing. We talk to each other, and maybe the way I see it is I would go to a client like this for maybe meeting for a day or two, and we might not actually do work, but we just connect to each other, that we know who we are, and then go back to both our homes, and then we work for another a few months, a year, or whatever, and then reconnect at the moment that it's needed. That's the kind of boundaries and the kind of, yeah, design, I would say, about our work that we need to do in the next years.
Yeah, I was surprised by my reaction and to working remotely. I am an introvert, and I didn't realize how much it would have affected me. And I think I realized, as a functional introvert, I I do draw uh, energy from working in very small groups with very comfortable people that I'm comfortable with and things. Uh, but I do miss. I like to combine work with people I work with social activities. I'd like to have a meal with them. I'd like to say, let's go and have breakfast together before we start our day. And just that act of stepping out of that space in which we work, that those aspects I miss about that, because that's changed the way I interact with people. Mm.
I
So there's
like
been
that
some
you say
sides
that.
and some downsides to it. So yeah.
I like that you put a link to introverts, because indeed I see a lot of people, and I've made that mistake myself as well in the past, to think, okay, all the extroverts want back to the office, and the introverts want to stay at home, and it's again, the world is much more complex than that. It's and like you say, for the work part, maybe it works remote because then you can have it, but there's definitely the connection part, which is maybe even more important for introverts than for extroverts. That
Yes.
is the small little things that we do around that, the coffee, the everything else there. So
Yeah.
that is indeed a very important part. Well, and now we talk about introverts. One of the things that a lot of introverts like is reading. I'm not sure if that's the case for you, but
I do.
do you like reading, and what kind of book
I
do you want
do.
to talk about?
I do. I do read. I read regularly, and I have a long um, list of books and a stack of books which I compulsively buy, but haven't had the time to read. And but
Oh
I
yeah.
will get to them. Because when I hang out with people and say, "Oh, you should read this," then yeah, I'm gonna. You said I should read. I'm going to read it. If you found it interesting, I'm going to find it interesting. So I buy it, and I get it. There's two books I read very recently. I've actually got them in front of me, and I'll just show it. There's this one, The Analog Brain by Anna Boden, and the other one is The
But
End of Ignorance.
the first one was this one, right? The analog
Yes,
brain. Let's
yes.
first talk a little bit about it. What do you want to talk
So
about, Anna's book?
I met Anna in May this year. At a conference in Sweden. Actually, we were in Croatia, and I met her, and she gave a talk about the chemistry of the brain and the anatomy of the brain, and how the chemistry and the chemicals it produces, dopamine, etc., etc., affects the way we behave and our our evolution has been designed for short-term survival, and now we live in
Mm.
a world of, relatively speaking, in first world countries, middle class and above families and societies of abundance. And our ability to survive is no longer under threat in that regard in many parts of the first world,
Mm.
especially if you have access to technology and in the digital world. And so, how do you actually do that? And there was one thing she said in her talk that got me hooked on this book, which is that our purpose in a group is to be the safest person.
Wow.
Hey, isn't that crazy, right? And then she starts off, she says, your job in any setting is to be the safest person. And then she goes on this beautiful arc, which is wonderfully described in this book. It's just, it's not even 100 pages that explains how the chemistry of our brain, produces these chemicals that cause us to react in a survival state to a calm state, etc. And you recognize all of these things. It's not like you're trying to change it. It's gonna happen. So understand it
But
and
just
see
to
how
make
you
sure
become a
that
better leader.
Aslam, just to make sure I understand, when you say our the goal is for us to be the safest person in the group, she means it for all humans, not just we
Oh,
coaches or anything. It's for
yeah,
all of us.
everyone,
Wow.
everyone. If you're in a social setting, at a dinner party, at a friend's house, be the safest person. And so try to be the safest person. And she explains the anatomy and the physiology and the chemistry of the brain and how that affects our behavior and takes us away from that. And so why is it sometimes we approach someone and then we step back? Is our survival instinct kicking in, and or we're uncertain about ourselves, and there's this chemistry, this chemical going through your brain right now that's forcing you to do that, because that's our evolution. That's the way we're wired. It's a fascinating topic. She does such great justice to make it really, really accessible, beautifully written, easy to understand, easy to read, wonderful person. Highly recommend it. You'll read it in a day, half a day.
Wow, it's yeah, but that's one of the disadvantages of doing this series. I feel that I have less time for reading, but it is again one of these books. When I hear about it, it's like, okay, can I order it tonight? And please, can I still? Unfortunately, I have another conversation tonight, but yeah, it's definitely something that I feel drawn to reading it. I
So,
had some conversation with someone else about being anonymous and in settings and about safety in the exact, well, actually yesterday evening. So it rings a lot of bells. So this is definitely a book that I will look for. Okay, you had a second book.
yes, The End of Ignorance by John Mighton.
So
This one.
that's the one, huh?
Yes, correct. Um, I this book has been sitting on my bookshelf for a number of years, and I read it this year. Um, no, I read it for the second time this year. I read it 2 years ago, and I read it again this year. Um, one of the things that I do pro bono, one of the big pro bono efforts, is that I'm part of a team that is building up a pedagogy and a curriculum for a software development academy or a tertiary institution in South Africa. Right? It's called We Think Code. It's free education, etc. It's one of the most difficult things I've ever attempted, which is to teach people. Okay. This book is by a person who introduced a pedagogy for teaching young kids, like primary school kids, uh, mathematics. And
Hmm.
what intrigued me is that his first lesson, and also with kids who genuinely have an aversion to mathematics or difficulty with mathematics, his first lesson is to teach fractions.
Wow. Okay.
Fraction,
that
fractions.
that's not the easiest part of mathematics to teach, but at the
Exactly.
same time it's also for a lot of mathematicians it's one of the nicest parts of maths, because you see it everywhere in nature around us, and you can see so many parallels to
Mm.
fractions to whatever yeah, other things we see. So why does he want to start with that?
Um, Not because it's a challenge, but because he brings this to the table to introduce the idea of this is a part of one. A fraction is something that's a part of something else, right? So
Mhm.
this is part of a whole, right? But it's notoriously complex, right, to teach. And so he brings it about by saying, no, actually, there's just some simple numbers here. And so he creates this comfort for kids by saying, can we add half and half, you know, or one third and two thirds, and simple numbers, and say, ignore the bottom, just count them on your fingers, the numbers on the top. And then he'll say, can you do 1 over 125 million plus 2 over 125 million? And they'll say, oh, it's 3 over 125 million. It's like, wow, I can do big numbers. And so you build up their confidence, you take away the mystique, and then you start moving to it. And it sounds like trickery, but there's a pedagogy and a philosophy behind that that breaks down the barriers and psychology of uh, impediments towards understanding something, and so he continues in that way. And at some point, he introduces, not too long after fractions, basically thinking in binary and converting things in binary to decimal. And so his approach is great. He turns education onto its head and says, uh, teaching without distractions, there isn't any gamification involved. It's a plain blank page. It's easy to read. There's no distractions. There's no draw me 10 peas and 20 peas. Now how many peas do I have in total, in a plate? So it doesn't do any of those illustrative things. This is the stuff that we do. And he's had incredible amount of success. It's incredibly inspiring. Very, very clear articulation of what's wrong with our education system in the way it's rote learning, and how we need to get into a place of experiential learning and lifting our own self-imposed biases about the idea of ignorance, that we can break through that. And so that's his thing. It's the end of ignorance. We assume certain characteristics that some people can do maths and some people can't. I guess it's the same thing about well, many of us in this world of software development and agile development and stuff is we're very particular, and vocal about diversity and inclusion and women in tech, etc. Where in the past it says you're a woman, you can't do that. So it's a similar approach, is that you you're not wired to do maths, therefore you don't do maths. And he says, no, you are wired. You just don't have the right pedagogy. And so that's an
Yeah,
incredibly inspiring thing for me.
I see a lot of that happening with both in work and in personal life, but
Mm,
people have it in their heads. I do think there are some limitations to what we can learn. I don't think I would be a good doctor, for example, to do surgery because of certain limitations that I have. But yeah, there's definitely a lot that most people can do. So there is we need to. It's not just talent; it's also a lot of work, and we need to do, and we need to have the right education and learning a lot. And what we see a lot is we see these people that achieved something, but we don't see all
mm,
the work that they've done and all the support that they had from the people around us. A little bit like you said when you said earlier on, oh, you want to go to university? Well, you have to have three people that tell you. That you're actually allowed to go to university, and then they say, well, there's a lot less black people than white people. They must be less smarter. Well, no,
yes,
you
same.
kind of build in boundaries.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
just today, I was talking to someone on the internet that says that she didn't have a computer at home, and so all the children in her school, in high school, they all got their assignment over computers, but she didn't have a computer in school, so she didn't know all the assignments, and so that she was punished for not having all the assignments. But
Wow.
actually, she so that yeah, so she in the end she achieved it, and I actually think yeah she achieved much more because she had to go to all these hoops. I yeah, I did a few things at university without having a computer, and learning how to program without a computer is difficult at certain
Yes,
levels.
yes,
You can learn it in theory, and then you can practice at libraries and stuff like
exactly.
that. But if you don't have a computer all the time, you're limited.
Yes, you are. Yeah, so
That's the kind of thing you're talking about.
he doesn't. John Mighton in this book doesn't postulate that anyone can learn anything, but his point is that with the right pedagogy, you can help someone understand something that they previously thought they were incapable of understanding.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the kind of tool for me. It's a tool like any other kind of thing. It's the physical. Sometimes you need the instruments like a computer. Sometimes you need a person that explains you and takes the time.
Mm,
Um, I know that one of my children sometimes got annoyed when they didn't understand anything at school. I would explain it in a different way, and they were like, "Yeah, but you should explain it the way my teacher explained." It was like, "No, because you don't understand the way your teacher explained it. So this is why I'm going to try it in a different way." Because if I explain it in the exact same way, you won't understand it. And so we need to look at what's a way to explain something. Like you say, we need to look at different ways. And sometimes for one child, this is the better way, and for another, this is the better way. And we need to look at and what I like about what you explain in this book is that we kind of seem to, and or at least that's how I understand, is that for math we kind of move to a lot of gamification, and okay, let's add this because it feels nicer for a
mm,
6 or a 7 year old, but maybe we made it actually harder. Maybe it's
yes.
just good to explain some of the basic stuff in a hard way, and then they're wired to do
Mm.
everything else.
So
That's
similarly, in the work that we're doing to build together a software development curriculum and exercises, I'm acutely aware of now of what are things that I'm trying to achieve, get people to understand, that is syntax, for example. Your first hurdle is syntax. It's a language that has a strange way of being written and read in programming code, um, as opposed to getting it to do something functionally correct. So there's different
mm,
hurdles, and what are we trying to focus on? So those are the things that that this book has absolutely, and John Mighton has inspired me to consider. um, it is something I will definitely collate my thoughts on, taken from things that I've learned from this book, things that I've tried. I will reduce it into some kind of talk to do at a conference soon, if the opportunity arises. I think that's something I think I'd be comfortable to share.
I would definitely be interested. Well, it's already, you have two books that yeah, I'm about to order right away. So because
I'm
they look
sorry.
very interesting.
My
No,
apologies.
it's well, luckily I'm reading a lot on Kindle. So basically, what it means when I
Okay.
say I'm ordering is I will
It's
download the
yes.
sample and I will look at that. And when I've read the sample, I will actually buy the book. So it's a little bit different than before. So I
Yeah.
spend a little less. The interesting part is I spend less money, but I read more books. So it's that
Yes.
way. That's how it works with Kindle with me.
You know,
Okay, let's.
you just want to share
Yeah, go
this with
ahead.
you, 2 minutes, is that you shared about teaching your kids, and so not too long ago, of a few years back, I was trying to code something and it required some statistics and stuff. And my son was in high school and he knew he was doing statistics for his advanced maths course. So I went to him in his room and I said, "Hey, you're doing this thing. Can you help me with this? Because I'm
Mm.
just being too lazy." He says, "Yeah, sure." And then the next thing, I go back to my desk and then I get this WhatsApp message and it's from my son and it's all YouTube links. So I go to him and said, "Why are you sending me YouTube links?" He says, "Well, that's what you must go and study. Watch that video, you'll be fine." I was like, for all the years where I made the effort to sit next to you and help you with your homework, now you send me YouTube links. He says, "Well, that's what I learned from." So what do you expect? So,
But yeah, it's. But I'm amazed at what my children know on how to learn from YouTube, and at the same time I'm like, how the hell did I learn things when I was
without,
whatever, somewhere between 12 and 16 years old? Because
yes,
yeah, I could have learned so much more from YouTube. Indeed, it's yeah. I still remember, I don't know what age, that my children needed to do something from school, and it was like, yeah, I'll explain later on because I'm busy or whatever, or I'm cooking or something. And then by the time I have time for them, they already found or or looked at 4 videos on YouTube, probably at double speed, and they're already much further ahead than I would want to explain to them. So it's like, okay, they figured it out on their own. Language is included because I
Yes.
think my 3 children learn English not from school but from YouTube, watching videos, and
Wow.
that this is where they learn their English from. Of course, they still have it in school, but they learn it first and primarily from YouTube, watching English
Okay.
things. I wanted to move to that next question, and what's a question that I didn't ask you and that you wished I would have asked?
You've covered so much, and I think we're also over time in such a it's been a long
Mhm.
conversation. I've enjoyed it. I, I that's a difficult one, you know. I if you could do something over again, what would you do?
Hmm. After everything you shared so far, I'm really interested in what you would do over again.
I wish I knew what I know when I'm 50 when I was 20. I wish I
So
absolutely
basically, you want to do your whole life over, but with the knowledge that you have now. It's about it.
exactly. Yes. I think the exuberance of youth. There were enough times where I think I could have made a better decision about certain things. It wasn't cataclysmic. It didn't destroy it, but I certainly think back and say, "Wow, seriously, that was so naive of you to have
Mhm.
thought and done that." But I do think it's interesting question to ask because it forces some kind of reflection on that. So,
Yeah,
um,
it's.
yeah,
I like that because indeed, like you say, it brought us where we are in making these yeah
mm,
what it's called. A friend of mine says, okay, our experience is actually based on the mistakes that we made of the past. It's a nice experience is a nice word for the mistakes of our past, something
mm,
like that.
mm,
um, and so there is a thing like, okay, I wish I've done something else, but at the same time then I would not have learned where I am now, and I, yeah, probably would not have achieved what I've
mm,
achieved now. So that's a different kind of thing. But it's like you say, it's really good to sometimes reflect on it and think about, okay, all these decisions that I took in my life, with what I know now, would I take the same decision? What's the good part? What's the bad part of that?
mm.
Well, and talking about decisions, who do you think I should ask next? Who do you think I should invite?
Um, in the book, I did recommend two people next. That was Karen Greaves and Sam Lang. But this time, I'm
Mhm.
recommending two other wonderful human beings. One is Suzanne Kaiser. She lives in Hamburg, and I'll share details and gladly connect you with her. Um,
And
Wonderful
if I
technologist.
think if I have, this is a
Yes,
picture from Suzanne,
that
if
is
I'm
exactly
correctly.
her. Yes, correct. Uh,
And she said so. She's lived in Hamburg. That's what you say. And
she
how do you
lives.
got to meet her?
I met her at an open spaces conference in Europe a few years back, and we've just built up relationships since then, and we're constantly in contact. And uh, amazing software developer, really great attitude. Uh, Tackling one of the hardest things I think right now is that she's combining uh, things with Wardley maps and team topologies and domain-driven design, and saying how do we use those three facets to go about building, architectures and systems for fast change in terms of team as well as software. So I think you'll have an absolutely blast of a time talking to her.
All of these three topics on its own is interesting to have a conversation
Exactly.
about. So somebody combining these three,
She's found a sweet
it's
spot and how that
exactly.
fits together. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think it's groundbreaking work that she's able to combine those things and come up with a way. And she talks about that at conferences and applies that in her work. So I've learned a lot from her and I deep, deep, deep respect for her.
And you had a second person in mind as
Yes.
well.
Yeah. And full disclosure, she's a very good friend of mine as well. Her name is Nyari Samshonga. She's based in Johannesburg.
I
Zimbabwean.
think this
Yes,
is her.
it is. It is.
I
Uh,
didn't show the pictures before in our pre-talk, so it's always a risk to show these
no,
kind of
it is.
pictures, and
It
then
is. It is. She's the CEO of We Think Code, the software development academy that I help out with. Uh, she's spoken at a few events and conferences in Europe as well. What I do appreciate about her is her not being a technologist by starting out in a career, but more often on the accounting and economic side and audit side, and then moving into accounting. So having conversations with her about agile software development, how teams build software, having never started there in her life, and
mm,
being there accidentally, uh, is incredible conversation. She brings a perspective that I've I've learned a lot from. Uh, Talks a lot about leadership and how to get teams moving and how to build organizations in a sustainable way. So yeah, I think
sounds interesting. It's
you'll
yeah,
enjoy talking to her. Yes.
just the explanation already sounds to me like okay, this is yet another person I want to meet and have it. And like I said earlier on in our pre-talk, for me doing this is for bringing three kind of people in back into my life. The first is the people that I've met before and I haven't seen in a very long time. Then people like you that we've met online and we had multiple conversations in multiple kind of digital ways, let's put it like that, but never have actually talked to each other like we're doing now. And then there is the third category, and this is where these two women fall under that I've never met before, that I've even I didn't
Mm.
know their names before you mentioned them. And that I can get and learn about new people in other parts of the world. So thank you for introducing me to them, and I hope indeed that I will have a nice conversation with them. So, if
Uh,
I want people, if people want to contact you, what could be a good way for people to contact you?
LinkedIn, Twitter is fine.
I think
Easiest. Yep.
LinkedIn I prepared.
Yeah.
Twitter I think I
At
forgot to prepare, but LinkedIn is
yeah.
usually indeed a good one.
Yeah. It's like the last part of my LinkedIn at Aslam KHN on Twitter.
I
It's
will
fine.
definitely add it
Ping me,
into the show notes. Um,
ping me
well,
and I'll respond.
thank you very much for your time. It's been wonderful, as much as I was hoping for. And indeed, like you said, we it's a little bit longer than I always hope to go it to closer to 1 hour. Well, if people are still hearing this, it means that they found it interesting, and I'm hearing it from more and more people that yes, it takes a long time, but it's one that people like these kind of conversations because they feel it's two people getting connected and sharing stories. So I hope that people have that same feeling with this conversation, and I actually hope to indeed sometimes visit you into Cape Town because it's like you said, it is an environment I definitely want to meet once, be here and then physically meet and being able to be in the same room with you because that is still is indeed a next level, I would
That
say.
would be absolutely wonderful to be able to experience that. Thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it. I think it's a wonderful series of videos you're putting together. There's some good friends and that you've spoken to before, and I've watched a few now, and they are interesting. And I apologize if I've dragged this out longer than it was planned for, but it was a very, very comfortable, enjoyable conversation. I hope people take something from this that's of value from our conversation. So, humble respects and thank you for hosting me. Appreciate it.
I don't think you need to apologize. I think it's again it's in the interaction. I probably asked some more questions because I was so intrigued by some of your stories, and then indeed that's what takes it longer. So, but I think yeah, the people are already still here. They probably appreciate it because they're still here. I appreciate it at least because I've learned a lot about you. I learned a lot about yeah what drives you. A lot of the things in your life. It makes sense. It's a story that feels very coherent to me.
Thank you.
It makes sense also to what I've learned before, and it kind of explains in some way on some of the interactions that we had. So I'm really happy that we did this. And like I said, let's meet each other in person somewhere later in our lives.
Yes. Thank you. Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.
Thank you for watching Who's Agile, where the stories of Agilists come to life. I hope you liked today's interview. Subscribe if you're not subscribed and want to get to know other Agilists.